I'm really glad today that our soloists that we had ready to go for our final concert with the Peterborough Symphony this weekend has agreed to talk to me about the music of Mozart. His name is Elijah Orlenko. He is the winner of the Marta Hidi Concerto for competition for piano. I had the great pleasure of working with Elijah last fall, where we performed another one of Mozart's famous concertos, the A major. This one this weekend was supposed to be the C minor, but thank you, Elijah, for joining me.
Thank you, Master Noonan.
It's great to see you. And Elijah, I'm always interested in finding out how people are doing, and you look like you're doing well. But tell me, how are you getting through this pandemic period?
Well, I feel like a little bit like a fish in a fish tank. The fish tank being my apartment in a where I live in a high rise. So, yeah. Um, I I practice and I imagine the audience as I always have. Of course, the one of the best parts of music is performing, and that part I cannot do during the pandemic. But I can do my other favorite part, working on new repertoire, and the journey towards the objective of performing. And yeah, also I learned new things about emotion. I've been thinking about emotion in music, and people want to um, people want to be affected emotionally when listening to music. That's why they go to concerts and uh, to get influenced and to feel emotion that they wouldn't feel normally in everyday life. Uh,
One of the challenges I think, Elijah, that most people are having right now, especially us musicians, because we don't have a public that we can perform for, is how do we keep ourselves motivated? And do you have any tricks that you use?
I I I don't find trouble with motivation because I always practiced and imagine the audience, and it's one of my favorite things to uh, learn new repertoire. And I also think about new subject, like I mentioned about how to how does extra emotional involvement affect your playing. I Of course, the common opinion is that, and it's true that audiences love when performers are engaged and involved. But there's another side to it when um, if the musical engagement, emotional engagement of the music is so can affect the performer's ability to um, to play the passages, like the performer's sensitivity, so can actually debilitate his own um, uh, ability to play. This is kind of counterintuitive, but for example, I'll give you an example. Um, if the musical um, content suggests a frightened mood, frightened atmosphere, naturally, what do people do when they're frightened? They hold their breath, um, hide, not make a noise, don't not move, and this same type of aspects can arise in my playing as in a frightened place in that type of atmosphere. And for example, my wrist can be and everything can be tense, and suddenly my passages notes are not playing. We call them dead notes, and that's why it's important, I think, to understand which aspects of emotional involvement uh, uh, stand in the way of performing, and which aspects contribute to the um, good performance and that engage the audience, and take those out, suppress the bad ones, and embrace the good ones.
So it sounds like what you've been doing is really going deep into yourself and finding out what works with your mind.
Yeah,
And you've been really using that time to
yeah,
do a lot of self-analysis, I think. Yeah.
yes, like kind of psychological aspects.
That's right. Yeah, it's so important in the world of music, I think, that we have to really understand it's a life's journey of trying to understand yourself. as well as other things. Um, a lot of us are feeling. A lot of us are feeling also during this period, during this lockdown period, that we've started to do some slightly different things, things that we haven't had time to do, or we're looking at the world a little bit differently, positively also, as well as negatively maybe. But is there anything that you've changed in some of your habits?
Well, my habits, I think the biggest change for me due to the pandemic was my perspective of going outside, and the few times, the rarely we do go outside about once a week, and that's much less frequent than we used to. But now when I go outside, it's just so much more refreshing, and I more I treasure those opportunities to go outside more.
I know it's so important. We take so many things for granted, and it's also the human contact. I think a lot of people are really missing that too. Um, and you know, also, I know that this is a period that is temporary. That we are going to come out of this eventually, and I know that you're thinking about your future. Um, what are your future plans?
I want to be a concert pianist, and my dream is to travel the world and perform with orchestra, um, in a whole bunch of interesting places. Because I love playing with orchestra. It feels like I'm a big part of a big group of people, and also the collaborative aspect of kind of like chamber music with the conductor and the orchestra. I like that a lot.
It's really the dialogue
Yeah.
with each other, which brings me to the next question because this is this would have been our second Mozart concerto together. And let's hope it does happen in the future. Um, but is Mozart a special composer to you? And is this piece, the C minor concerto, special?
Yeah, Mozart's very special, especially this concerto, because it's one of two one of two only minor concertos that he wrote. He wrote 23 in total. And as a child, I always felt that minor melodies were more beautiful than major, and that's why I really like this one. And he wrote this concerto at the same time as he wrote Marriage of Figaro, and Marriage of Figaro is so happy, and it seems like all of his sadness from that period is poured into this one. Uh, and Also, I learned cadenza for this concerto, and at first I was ignorant about who the composer was. I didn't pay attention, and I noticed aspects of the cadenza that um, resembled Beethoven and Chopin, and I assumed that the writer of this cadenza was inspired by those composers. Later, I found out that I was so wrong, because the composer of this cadenza was Johann Hemmel, and he lived before Chopin, and it was Chopin who drew inspiration from him.
And
And
it's interesting too because Hummel was one of Mozart's pupils.
yeah, yeah, and he right at the time when he wrote this concerto, he was living. Hummel was living at the house of Mozart.
What would how many of us would give our eye teeth to be in that position to be able to live at Mozart's house
Yeah, that's
at the
awesome.
time that he was writing music like this? Elijah, it's such a pleasure to see you again and to talk to you and to get your thoughts about music and thank you for the lovely excerpts that you've sent. We can hear part of this great concerto in your hands, and let's hope that we can get over this period as soon as possible. And that also, I really wish that in the future that you and I will have the chance to play this concerto together and other ones as well.
Yeah,
All the very best of luck to you. All my best wishes.
thank you. You too.
Thank you.